Hey YouTube, Joe Walker here at Def Digits Guitar Lessons, and I'm going live right now for my student Andy, who's missing today. And Andy has been working on kind of integrating his bar chords with his open chords that he normally plays on acoustic guitar. He's done a lot of stuff with open chords on acoustic guitar and just a little bit of work with bar chords. And what I constantly encourage Andy to do is take his electric guitar, because he has one, and practice doing bar chords only on electric guitar. Typically, that's how bar chords are going to get used. They'll be used much more often on electric than on acoustic, but they are also easier to do on electric. So if you're learning them, you got to get used to the format, or like the technique, the position that your hand is supposed to be in, more than you need to get used to the strength, or you need to get used to the calluses. Those things help, but it's more about the position that your fingers need to go into to even get the chords to work. So make it easier on yourself. And if you have access to an electric guitar as opposed to acoustic, work on your bar chords on electric, and work on songs or little exercises that only use bar chords. Don't try to go back and forth between open chords and bar chords in the beginning, because it's kind of a drastic shift in technique. Open chords, you'll play with this kind of wrist position back here, coming in, kind of gripping it like a handshake, and it's more of like a thumb over the top, and you can play all your typical open chords like that with this strong grip. I think of it as the apple crushing grip. If I were able to crush an apple, that's what I'm doing with open chords. Not so with bar chords. For bar chords, see, my entire shoulder had to drop to get down into a comfortable bar chord position. And now I can play all my bar chords just fine, all over the neck in this position. So open chords are up here like this with this grip. Bar chords are down here with this grip. You have a low wrist. Your thumb is down like this. See my thumb down there in that open space down here? These are open chords like this, bar chords down like this. So in the beginning, just separate the two. Work on bar chords by themselves, work on open chords by themselves, and keep them separate until you're comfortable in each of those realms. So when you're working on bar chords, let me give you some things that you can do. If you have to do this on acoustic, that's fine. But if you have an electric, then make the task easier on yourself. So exercise number 1, I'm going to assume in this lesson that you already know your bar chords. Your 4 bar chords like this: root 6, major and minor, and root 5. That's root on the 6th string, root on the 5th string. Root 5 major and minor, like that. So you can take, let's start at the 5th fret for these exercises. So first exercise is just gonna take 2 major chords of the same type on the same string and just moving back and forth between them. You can do this anywhere, but I'm going between frets 5 and 8. For this example, I'll try to keep that for all these examples as long as it sounds musical. Fret 5, 8. Now, as you're doing this, I'm going to give you a bunch of other examples like this, but let me point out some things that I'm doing with my hands as I transition between those chords. One is my left-hand fingers are never actually leaving the strings. They're kind of sliding along the strings, and they never actually come all the way off like that. They release the pressure, and they're just relaxed. You can see kind of like that. And I move down to the other chord and press. And then I relax and move to the other chord and press. So this is easiest done when you're not changing strings and you're not changing the shape of the chord. It's the same shape going between 2 different places. So you can get a feel for how your fingers just don't need to leave the strings at all. And what this allows you to do is that little bit that I'm putting between the chords. I'm doing 2 down strums on each chord, just down, down, and then I relax as soon as the second down strum is done. And then I put just a little down up in between as I'm just transitioning between the chords. So that's my new little transition sound. If you've done a lot of open chord stuff, you're used to this being your transition sound. In between the chords, you have that open strings are ringing on the last up strum between the chords. That's kind of like the guitar is inhaling at that moment. All those chords are ringing out, and the transition moment rings out, all those open strings ringing out. With bar chords, you've got everything muted as you transition between chords. We don't have any of that open string ringing between the chords because you're not lifting your fingers off the strings. So now your new transition sound is that mute sound. So playing a bunch of bar chords is going to have a very different quality to it than playing a bunch of open chords. The open chords are going to sound much more ringy and jangly and chimey, and the bar chords can sound a lot more staccato because you can do that kind of stuff. Your left hand can relax and cut off all of those strings very quickly. Like that. I can play those two chords open. It's an A and a C. But it sounds much more open and ringy. So you get very different qualities, even just using the same right hand technique when you're going bar chords versus open chords. So try to use that to your advantage. Whenever you're changing bar chords now, you can throw a mute in or throw a couple mutes in. You can keep your strumming pattern intact, but now your transition is just keep your fingers on the strings as you move from one bar chord to the next. Let's keep that in mind as we do some more examples. Let's do that same thing, but with two minor chords now. So we've got 5th fret minor and 8th fret minor. And now let's do root 5, same thing. Root 5 major, let's do 5th fret and 8th fret again. And minor. In all of those examples, you're moving the same position, the same finger shape from one place on the fretboard to a different place on the fretboard. So it's straightforward to keep your fingers on the strings. Now we're going to do something different. We're going to mix the majors and minors, so you have to change your finger position just a little bit, where we're going to go, let's say, 5th fret, root 6, major, and go up to the 8th fret, minor. So now you have to change it just a little bit, but at least your bar finger, your first finger, is going to stay on the strings the whole time. And probably these two other fingers, fingers 3 and 4, are going to stay there the whole time. It's only your second finger that's going to come on and off. So still on those transitions, you got to keep your fingers on so that you're muting the strings in between. Then you can do the reverse, do major over here on the 5th fret. Switch it, do minor on the 5th fret and major on the 8th. Then the same thing on root 5, do major on the 5th fret, minor on the 8th fret. And this is a more drastic rearrangement of fingers, because over here you've got your 3rd finger, and you come in over here with fingers 2, 3, and 4 on the upper notes, but still your bar finger is the one that should be touching all the strings at all times, no matter what root string you're on, no matter what fret you're on, no matter whether you're in between chords or on a chord, that bar finger should always be touching all the strings. Hi. That one should be touching all the strings all the time. It's not pressing all the time. It's relaxed when it's in between the chords, but it is always touching all the strings. So we did major and minor, and we also need to do minor and major. And you'll find examples of all these in songs that you do when you're using bar chords in a song, or just find a progression that you know the progression with With open chords, just switch to playing bar chords and you'll give that song a totally different feel. And you'll find examples of these where you have to go back and forth between a major chord here and a minor chord there. Just zoom in on that part of the song and work on that back and forth as an exercise. Next thing you can do is change strings. So now let's do, say, let's start with this. 5th fret, major, root 6, going to 5th fret, minor, root 5, like that. The reason for that is it keeps the same finger shape, like that. So now we're not gliding along the strings anymore. We're not keeping our fingers on the strings, like without moving vertically, just move. Now we're moving from one set of strings to another, but still what we're going to try to do is keep our fingers touching the strings at all times. With your first finger, it's easy to see what you have to do. You just relax it from here when you're on root 6. You relax it and you move it down towards the floor just a little bit so that you can have root 5 and still be touching that low E string and mute it out. So your first finger is doing this kind of move where it's move down here and press, release, and move up here and press, release, and it's just going back and forth, kind of slithering along the strings like that. These other 3 fingers, when you're doing that kind of move, you still want to try not to take them all the way off the strings. If you can just release them and just sort of manhandle the strings and just like, just kind of move them across the strings like that, that is much more efficient than taking them off the strings and putting them all the way back down. When you're doing bar chords, this is really essential for keeping your finger movement efficient. Just don't push the strings around like that. Just try not to come off of them completely. It's just relaxed and just slide them over from one string set to the next. Next, you can mix up major and minor. Oh, we just did mix up major and minor. Mix up different finger shapes, bar chord shapes. So you got maybe minor down here with minor up there. And major down here with major up there. And then you can do, let's see, what is that? All the possibilities? Come up with your own possibilities. Major up here with minor down there. Final thing you can do with this is combine everything we've done so far, where you're moving from one string to the next set of strings and you're moving between frets. So you can start by just doing a 1 fret move that's sort of like that. You're just moving diagonal, going from root 5 up here, minor, down to root 6, major. And all the same principles apply. Try to keep your fingers manhandling the strings as much as possible. Definitely do not let your bar finger release the strings at all. It shouldn't come off at any point. It should always be on so that in the middle of a bar chord song, you always have that sound. There are never any strings ringing. Never any open strings ringing. And you can mix that up quite a bit. When you're playing real bar chord songs, this happens all the time. When you have a chord here and a chord there and a chord here and a chord there, oftentimes you have to switch strings and move up and down between frets in the same move. And in the long run, what you want to try to make happen is that moving along one string feels the same as moving on different strings on the same fret feels the same as moving diagonally between strings and between frets. I remember in the beginning when I was learning power chords and bar chords, it was much easier for me to move along the string. And then it was a little bit harder to move between strings on the same fret. And I thought it was impossible to move diagonally between strings and between frets. But eventually, in the long run, it all just kind of evened out. And now when I play bar chords, it doesn't really matter. I just go where I need to go. And they all those changes feel the same. And most of it is because I'm constantly keeping that finger rubbing against the strings no matter where I go. And if I move it along the string this way, it's fine. It's the same as moving along the string this way, same as moving diagonally. Now it's more like I have the freedom to just move that bar finger wherever I want it to go. So in all of these exercises, no matter how you do it, just make sure that bar finger is always touching the strings. That's it for today. thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.